Hi, thanks for joining me. So I'd like to do another update about my translation projects. The last video I did I enjoyed, and it's been about 5 months, and I wanted to do another update because those 5 months have been tremendously productive, and not all of it has been just my personal efforts during that time. Some of it has been other people's efforts, and the fruits of my labors from the year 2017 and previously. So to start off, I want to talk about Battle Golfer UE. Now, it seems, like it would have been more than 5 months ago that I started working on that project, but I don't remember mentioning it in my previous video, so it's probable that I didn't. I noticed this project, or this game I should say, because of a post on Dynamic Design's forum, where somebody had posted Sega Genesis games or Sega Mega Drive games that had or had not been translated into English, and Battle Golfer UE was on that list. And I'd encountered this game before on a couple of YouTube videos, so I decided to just take a look at it, and it seemed really goofy, and surprisingly, the script and text was fairly easy to find and make a table file for and dump. So because I had done that, I had it open in my editor, and I just sort of picked away at the script until it was done, because it's actually a fairly small script. Once I'd finished up with that, I wasn't sure what to do with it, and I happened to be on romhacking.net's forum, where I noticed a post by the user Supper, who was working on another Mega Drive game, and he had made a really beautiful title screen for the Sailor Moon action beat-em-up game on the Mega Drive, and he was actually looking for translation help. So, noticing that, I decided to take a chance, and I said, hey, would you be interested in doing a little quid pro quo? I would be willing to translate Sailor Moon for you if you would be interested in helping me out with Battle Golfer UE. And much to my surprise, he agreed, and we went ahead and banged out that project. He did an awesome job, and we released that project right at the tail end of 2017. I really wanted to get at least one project released in 2017, because if you guys remember, I worked really hard last year on fan translation, and that was my own choice, and I enjoyed doing it. But it was going to be a little disappointing to reach the end of the year and have no released projects to show for it. So Battle Golfer UE was just perfect for that. It really made me feel very satisfied about the year. And, fast forward now to March of 2018, and actually a YouTube channel that I admire, Did You Know Gaming, released a very awesome video in a series they call Region Locked about Battle Golfer UE, and specifically our fan translation of it. They were very nice in crediting everybody involved in the fan translation, so I thought that was very cool. And they give a lot of additional information about the references in the game. Suffice to say, Battle Golfer UE is a super goofy kind of parody, where all of the characters are their parodies of other Japanese pop culture characters, and you play a high school aged girl who is kidnapped by a mad scientist who's established an evil organization intent on taking over the world by creating cyborg battle golfers. So he decides that you and your friend are the ideal candidates for the cyborg bodies that they have developed, and so you're kidnapped and you're given a cyborg body, and before your brainwashing is complete, you are rescued by a mysterious man, and you want to know what happened to your friend Ron. So you end up entering a golf tournament that is sponsored by the organization that had kidnapped you, in order to find out what happened to your friend Ron and find out more about the evil scientist's plans. So it's tremendously goofy. That's really what drew me to the project, and I'm so happy that we were able to complete it, and that this video introduced the game to more people in particular, and it's nice to have it as a resource too for some of the references in the game, because I wasn't aware of all of them myself. So that's been very fun to watch. I suggest you guys check that out. I'll put a link to it in the description so you guys can see it. Next up, because Supper and I enjoyed working on Battle Golfer UE so much, Supper took it upon himself, after I posted a help wanted ad on romhacking.net, to respond and take a look at I said City Adventures Dodge that I had worked on in July of the previous year. I did mention that in my last video, and that script had just been languishing around since then. So after I posted that help wanted ad and we started working on the project, come to find out, somebody mentioned that they had actually gotten that script fairly recently back to King Mike. And that was confusing to me, because King Mike had been very active in the translation of early Famicom games thread on romhacking.net that Cyclax had started to just make an effort to sort of fill in the holes of projects that hadn't been completed in the very early years of the Famicom in like 1984, 85, 86. Which I don't know if it was released as far back as 84, but it might have been. But yeah, so yeah, King Mike had been very active in that, and he mentioned he had been working on the project, but I wasn't sure if he was planning to continue working on the project. So Supper and I reached out to him, and it sounded like we were both interested in moving forward on our projects, so we decided to just do that. So Supper and I finished up City Adventure Touch and we released it, so I was very happy to have managed to do that. And the game is, as I mentioned I think in my last video, uses a license for the Touch manga and anime. It's a sports manga about some kids in high school that play baseball. But the game itself is like a little action adventure game, and it doesn't really have anything to do with Touch, aside from they actually did use the characters from the game in it. And it's interesting. It reminds me a little bit more of almost a Western style adventure game to a certain extent than it does, certainly more than it does like a traditional Japanese adventure game, which is sort of like a text style adventure game where you choose, look, and talk and speak from a menu. Battle Golfer UE actually uses that interface, and City Adventure Touch does not. So it's kind of unique as far as Japanese adventure games go. So it's an interesting little title on the Famicom. I'm really glad that we were able to release it. I think that Supper did a really great job on it too, in particular. So after that, I heard back from Spinner 8, who had been working on Sherlock Holmes with me. If you guys remember in my last video, I had translated that and gotten that script back to him, and rather graciously, I think with a certain amount of self-awareness and lack of ego, Spinner 8 reached out and he said, I'm just realizing I don't think I'm gonna pursue this project. I think it's probably better for me to just kind of hand it back to you and just say, I'm probably not going to get anywhere with this. He just had sort of lost interest, and I was like, thanks for for owning up to that. I thought that was great. I said, hey, would you be interested in sharing your notes and your work on it? And he was like, absolutely. So we made a little script package. I licensed it under the Creative Commons non-commercial attribution license, and we put it out there. I also posted help wanted ad, and this time Cyclax, who I'd mentioned had that thread about translating early Famicom games, expressed an interest in this, because this is another one of those games that I believe we were up to 1987 in terms of trying to sort out some of the early projects that hadn't, games that hadn't been translated, and Sherlock Holmes was from that time period. So he took a look at it and was able to turn that around really quickly. It took him about 2 weeks. It's just a little game, but there were some technical hurdles, I think, involved in it with the way it stores pointers and things like that. There's technical notes in the README for that, so I would definitely recommend that you check that out if you're interested. But I was really happy to be able to see that project also turned around and released here right in early 2018. So that's, one right after another, 3 releases within just a few months of each other. And I like also how, once you release a project, it feels good and it builds up a little momentum, and we had this train rolling. So Cyclax decided that he'd be interested in taking a look at another one of my scripts that I had translated kicking around. So we decided to work on SWAT. Now, I don't remember in my last video if I'd finished the script for SWAT yet. I don't think I had, because I know I was finishing it up fairly recently, and then there was actually one miscellaneous file that I had forgotten that I never finished. So once he expressed an interest in that, I finished up that miscellaneous file, got that back to him. SWAT is, of course, the almost structured like a dungeon crawling RPG / adventure game, where you play a SWAT team going into a building where hostages are being held by terrorists, and you're trying to liberate those hostages and defeat the terrorists. It's kind of like Die Hard, but with a SWAT team going into the building, not being in the building when the terrorists arrive. Anyway, and it's a very interesting game. It's notorious for having a lot of bugs. Apparently, it's a little hard to progress through, and towards the end of the game it kind of tends to crash, and that was just present in the original game. And we were considering maybe trying to fix up some of those bugs, but it seems like Cyclax and maybe some other people were able to finish the game, using the translation patch without too much trouble. So it certainly is a playable game. It's just buggy. So we went ahead and released that as well. So that was very exciting, and I'm just, happy as a clam that all of these projects have been released. Now, so that brings us to, I guess, the only other release that has happened, and this was really not anything to do with me, but I'm mentioning it because I do very much like seeing games crossed off the list, so to speak. There's almost close to 300 games left to translate for the Famicom, and every single game on the Famicom will have some form of English localization, be it official or fan, official or unofficial. And I was doing some research on games that I might like to translate. One of them I noticed was not translated. It's called Fighting Road. And in doing my research, I ran across a YouTube video where somebody had translated all of the text in annotations on the YouTube video. Excuse me, when I checked the description, I noticed that they had actually released a ROM with the translation applied to it. Now, the user who did the hacking on that, I believe, is called Immutable. The translator in this case was Deep Wolf. This is the same person who had posted that YouTube video. And so they hadn't released a patch on romhacking.net. So as far as romhacking.net was concerned, and kind of the lists and the database there, that this game had never been translated. So I went ahead and made a patch from the ROM. I compared that ROM to a base ROM and confirmed that they both were identical aside from the text that had been translated. So I went ahead and made a patch from that, submitted that to romhacking.net, and that was one more game off the list. So that was nice to have been looking for a game that I thought hadn't been translated, just to find out that it had actually been translated. I wouldn't mind finding that out for every single game that was left for the Famicom, which unfortunately is not going to be the case. But continuing news, there's actually a lot of other work and progress that has been made on a lot of projects. One of those is Ranma 1/2, Chogi Ranbu-hen. Now, this is the third of the Ranma 1/2 versus fighting games on the Super Nintendo, or the Super Famicom. And we started working on this because on Dynamic Designs, Bongo very graciously had asked on the forums if there were any games that I would like to see translated. And I was like, yeah, there are. And I made a small list of, I think, 5 games that I was like, I'd be really interested in working on some of these projects if you had any interest in doing that at all. And this was one of the games. This is actually a game that I had imported back in the day. It may have been my first import, actually, for my Super Nintendo when I had picked one up used. So I imported this around, might have been 1996, something like that. I think it came out in 96 or 95, somewhere in that range. And it was just a really fun game. It didn't have a lot of text, so I was interested in translating it because I knew it wasn't going to be terribly hard. And also, I just love Ranma 1/2. I think it's a very fun manga and anime, and I like Rumiko Takahashi's older works in particular. So Bongo was able to dump that script, and I translated it right up. Didn't take me very long. And I was very excited about it. We worked, Bongo worked up some tools and gave me the tools, so I actually went through and I actually played through the whole game, with some cheats. I edited all the text so that it fit in the text windows, and got it all worded the way that I wanted it to, and the project was really far along. But being the kind of game it is, there was a lot of graphics work to be done, and I started working on it. It's not really my forte, but I can do a decent job. But it was going to be super tedious and take a lot of work. So I mentioned to the group, I was like, hey, does anybody else want to help out with this? And Task Force was really interested in doing that. He's sort of the graphics guru amongst the group and likes working up his own fonts and things like that. So he took on the lion's share, or I should say, it was kind of the lion's share of the project work in some ways. I mean, the hacking is substantial and the translation is substantial, of course, but it was I think just a whole lot of work to get all of the graphics edited for the game, and a lot of text, obviously, because that's the main thing we're translating. But the text for, like, when it says fight and when it says the round is over, and you have, there were some signs in the backgrounds. We translated all of the names for all of the stages that you can select in, if you're playing versus mode. There was just a whole bunch of stuff, all the character names, for Ranma and Shampoo and Ryoga and Akane and all those characters. They all appear as graphic tiles, so all of that stuff needed to be changed. A lot of technical work associated with that Bongo needed to help out with, so I was hands-off on the project for all of this time, and the project is nearly complete. There was the title screen to do, and really it's been quite an adventure, but it hasn't taken all that long, and I think it's coming out really, really well. The last little bit of work that we need to do, I believe, is the credits on the title screen don't clear once you choose start, and like the start and options menus and things like that come up. You end up with some of the text from the credits where we basically had to translate the credits that appear at the bottom of the screen. So that's a little technical thing. Hopefully we can get that sorted out and we'll get this game released. So I'm really looking forward to that being out in the wild here really soon. I don't expect that to take very long. The next thing that I finished up is actually a script for Kagero Densetsu, which, actually, and speaking of which, so Ranma 1/2 Chogi Ranbu Hen, we're calling Ranma 1/2 Hard Battle 2 Super Move Hustle. Super Move Hustle being a fairly, a translation in the spirit of the meaning of Chogi Ranbu Hen, which is kind of like the super move. Like, it's sort of like a wild dance is literally how they translate the kanji that appear in that. And Hen is chapter, so all of the Ranma games are like called the so-and-so chapter. And so the last Ranma 1/2 fighting game actually was localized in the West. It was called Ranma 1/2 Hard Battle. So we decided to call this Ranma 1/2 Hard Battle 2, and to give it the subtitle of the what I think is a fun translation of the actual Chogi Ranbu Hen, Super Move Hustle. So, anyway, so Kagero Densetsu. This was a project that was brought to me by King Mike, actually, once he noticed that I was really interested in working on a lot of projects again, and was doing some Famicom work. He was like, hey, would you be interested in the script? I said, sure. So, It's actually seems like a little bit of a later Famicom title, but it's relatively simple. It's structured kind of like an action RPG again, but it's think of something along the lines of like Zelda 2, where you walk around an overworld, you visit towns, and you don't go into the towns, but you have dialogue options that happen when you reach the towns, and certain things that'll happen, like you can get items, or you can talk to somebody and they'll give you directions, that kind of thing. And then as you go around in the world, you'll run into random battles that you fight in action, side-scrolling level where you're a ninja, so you're like jumping and running around and throwing ninja stars and things like that. And it seems pretty fun. And the script is short. It's a pretty simple game. I know, in terms of the name, Kagero Densetsu, it's fairly straightforward. Kagero is a name, and it's the name of the characters in the game. And Densetsu is just legend. It's the same thing as like Legend of Zelda has Densetsu. It's like Zelda no Densetsu. So, but interestingly with this, I did a lot of research on it, and I was like, well, what are the precedents for translating a title with Densetsu in the name that isn't something no Densetsu? That really implies the legend of the thing. Whereas if it's just there's no in there, that's a particle, Japanese particle, no. This is just Kagero Densetsu, not Kagero no Densetsu. Is that going to be treated differently? And I think there's actually, precedent for it being translated as The Legend of Kagero. But there's also precedent for it being translated more like The Legendary Kagero. And I was like, that feels more right to me. I think you've just got Kagero Densetsu, and it's like Legendary Kagero. And in this case, actually, you have 3 characters who are their family name is Kagero, I believe. And your father had died, and these 3 characters, you can actually switch between them in the game, which is cool. So these 3 different characters, so it's really the Kageros, it's plural. Japanese doesn't have plurals for the most part. So I like the name, the Legendary Kageros for this game. So we'll see what King Mike decides to do, but that was my suggestion, and hopefully we'll see that project finished up at some point. I don't know what King Mike's schedule is. I don't know how motivated he is for this project. Maybe it'll sit around for 10 years, or maybe it'll get banged out and come out next week. I don't know. So there's some other things that I'm working on, and I've been dumping a lot of scripts, and certain things are in production, and that's all very exciting. I guess first off, another one of those games I wanted to translate for, not for Dynamic Designs, but I wanted Dynamic Designs to work on with me, is 3x3 Eyes. Now, there are 2 3x3 Eyes games on the Super Famicom in particular. One of them has already been translated, and I'd been working with Gideon Z on it, on that one, and that never really panned out, so somebody ended up translating that, which is great. But there's still like an RPG kicking around for 3x3 Eyes. It's called 3x3 Eyes. I think it's Seima Kōrinden, and it basically translates to the advent of the divine demon. And I think in this case it's referring to Kaiyan Wang, who is like the main deity character. For his coming is foretold in 3x3 Eyes, and everybody is anticipating, all of the demons of the underworld are anticipating the resurrection of Kaiyan Wang. So that's the name of the game, and I translated the script a long time ago. Specifically, King Mike and I were working on this project way back in 2005. And we'd actually gotten really far in it, and there were some technical things. I was doing some playtesting on it. Something to do with like the magic system was not working right, and I was like, hey, here's what's going on. And King Mike just didn't really get back to me about it, and I think it just sort of fell off his radar. And so the project never really ended up happening. And now I've contacted him a couple times over the years about it, and he's expressed an interest in continuing to work on it, but it's just never really gone anywhere. So it's literally been 12 years. And so I mentioned to Dynamic Designs that this was another project I was interested in. The script is completely ready to go, and they were like, we're ready to work on some stuff, let's do it. So 3x3 Eyes is being worked on by Bongo. Worked up all the tools for it. Wild Bill is editing the script and playtesting, and as far as I know, it's coming along great. So that may be a 2018 project here, release for us, which would be excellent. And really, Dynamic Designs, where like last year, things were a little so. Now things have really kicked into high gear in terms of, I think a lot of the work was done last year, but in terms of the releases, I think 2018 is going to see a lot of Dynamic Designs releases. So what we have on the table is, of course, God, Mezame Yoto Koega Kikoe, which I had mentioned in my previous video. That is in beta testing, so that's just about ready to go. Maybe in the next few months that'll be out. We also have the two Aretha games, Aretha 1, Aretha 2, which I translated, I think all Aretha 1 on my own, and Aretha 2, someone else had translated like half of it, so I translated the other half. So that's a lot of work that's, of mine that I did years and years ago, and I think those two projects are going to come out this year. And I almost think there was some other relatively substantial RPG. And Dynamic Designs has already released another RPG that I didn't really have anything to do with this year, which was La Wares, I believe, for the Super Famicom. So yeah, I think the culmination of a lot of the work that we've done over the past 5, 6, 7 years is coming together and is getting released in 2018. So it's a very exciting year. In addition to that, that Pachio-kun script that I dumped, I've been picking away at a little bit, so that's kind of fun. I feel like I'm starting to understand Pachinko a little bit, which is really terrifying me. But there's an interesting video actually on Pachio-kun. This is actually specifically Mezase Pachi Pro Pachio-kun. So it's like become a Pachinko Pro Pachio-kun. But somebody did a YouTube video on it, and they seem to actually like Pachinko, and I feel like I learned a little bit by watching their video, and now I'm kind of like getting into the Pachio-kun game a little bit, and it's interesting. So that may be a project someday. At least I hopefully will finish up the script at some point. And I'm interested still in dumping scripts where I can, and working on new stuff. So I actually dumped a script for Gunhead, Aratanaru Tatakai, I believe it's called, which is like Gunhead: The New Battle. Now, I don't know that this has anything to do with the Gunhead game on the PC Engine, or the movie Gunhead. And then there might even be a manga Gunhead, I kind of forget. I don't think, but maybe it does. I need to do a little more research on actually, how, what this game is. But it's a strategy game, like a mech strategy game that you play on the Famicom. And it actually seems pretty cool. The script is super short because it's just functional text, basically, about finding items on the board and fighting things and stuff like that. And the battles actually play out automatically. You basically put in a series of stats that you adjust on your mechs, and then you have them battle on their own. Actually, I think maybe you can do it manually, or you can have the game play the battle out on its own. And actually, I say, I call it a strategy game, but it's not really a tactical strategy RPG, because the gameplay is kind of action based, and like I said, you can just have the game play it for you. So it's a really interesting little game, actually, and I'm excited to translate it. I'd love to see that out in the wild for people to play. I also dumped a couple scripts recently. Well, I dumped some scripts, and I made some table files for some games that I'm going to need a little technical help with. I haven't really asked anybody for help, but I noticed Mini Racer Yonku, which seems pretty interesting. It's actually a Konami game, and you guys know that Konami is known for their quality of their Famicom work. But Mini Racer Yonku is about these toy cars that were super popular in the 80s, I guess, in Japan, and I even think they might still do them now. I almost think that they were even a mini game in maybe one of the Yakuza games, I think, where you could play these little mini racing cars. And they're not remote controlled, they're just motorized, and so you basically just, you set them down and they just go on their own. So what they'll do is they'll make these tracks for them, and they just sort of run along the tracks. And you sort of race them. I mean, and you can do a lot of customization to them, I guess, and stuff like that. And it's sort of like building a model that you can then race on tracks. So yeah, it seems like an interesting little game. I actually played a little bit of it. You almost play it kind of like a board game, but then you have battles that are races, and you're basically trying to like get parts and win parts and get money in order to like upgrade your little racing cars. It seems pretty cool, but when I made the table file for it, the game actually has a very big dictionary. So this is kind of compression where you have just 1 or 2 bytes that are going to represent a whole phrase stored somewhere else in the game data. And it basically just lets your script be a little bit smaller, especially if you're gonna, I guess if you're gonna reuse that phrase, would probably give you the most bang for your buck. So it'll be like a word or something like that maybe gets used multiple times in the script. Saves you a little bit of space. So but if the dictionary is large enough, I really need somebody that has the technical know-how to sort of match the dictionary up to the pointers or something, so they can just dump those words out into the script so I can translate them, because otherwise I'd sort of have to go through it manually and like actually edit the game so that the words show up in the game as I play it, and I have to like mark each one in the table file. I mean, if I do that, I can actually dump the script and all the have all the dictionary entries in it. But if the dictionary is big, it would take me forever. So I need help with that. I also made a table file for World Boxer on the Famicom, which is a very interesting, it's kind of a Punch-Out clone. And I guess, most people would say, well, what's the point, because Punch-Out is so good. But, it seems like an interesting attempt at maybe it's a cash-in on Punch-Out, but it actually has sort of Punch-Out's original arcade like silhouette style of character model on the screen for your boxing action. It seems interesting. At the very least, it's a game I think is worthy of being translated. I think all of the games on the Famicom should be translated, and I made a script for it. But I shouldn't say I made a table file for it. In order to dump a script properly, there's some text in the game that does something odd with how it deals with its Dokten, which is the is that right? The Dokten and Handokten. Anyway, the diacritical marks on the characters. It's something specific to Japanese in terms of the way that they do their alphabet, but there are certain characters that are modified by an extra. There's these 2 little lines or a little circle, and it'll change how a character's pronounced. And normally this is dealt with in these old games by just adding an extra byte that indicates the Dokten or Handokten, and then you can just dump that out. Or add it into the table file, and it's easy to deal with. But in this case, it deals with those in some way that I don't understand. So somebody else is going to have to help me out with that. So hopefully I could find some help. And I also dumped an actual script, because I don't need technical help with it, for Golfco Open, otherwise known as Golf Girl Open, is what I would assume that is. So that's a golf game, and you play as a woman, I think. Well, there might be different selectable characters. I'm not 100% sure, but I don't know a whole lot about the game, honestly. It seems like it's a little quirky with a little personality, though, which is good, I think, for a golf game. And there might be a little bit of maybe like an adventure element to it or something like that. But at the very least, there's some text to it. I don't really remember how long the script looked like it was, but I always enjoy translating a game with a little text that gives it some flavor. But it's nice when it's not too much, so that it's not like one of those huge RPG scripts that goes on and on and on. I mean, I love doing that once in a while. I mean, the Aretha games and stuff like that I translated, and the work I did on GOD and stuff like that was fun, but sometimes those scripts are long. So Golf Girl seems nice and short, and so I'm interested in translating that up at some point. But so I've been doing so much work. I've actually posted on rumhacking.net just saying, hey, if anybody out there translates from Japanese to English and you're interested in helping me out, I just have so many scripts that I'd love some help with these. If you guys want to translate Golf Girl Open, and I can keep working on something else. I want to kind of, I don't want people to think I'm being lazy. It's not laziness. I'd like to increase my output, and in order to do that, I need to do some parallel processing here. So that means, if I can delegate some work, I think that, I'm at the age where I'm like, I don't need to do all this stuff myself. I'm happy delegating. If other people can do some stuff, we all accomplish more, collectively. So that would be great. If anybody's interested in helping me out with stuff, let me know. But anyway, this video is long. I think it's longer than my last one, but it's partially because so much great work happened in the last 5 months. So I'm really excited about that, and I just wanted to share it with you guys. I hope it was interesting, and I hope you'll join me again. Maybe I'll do another update in another 5 or 6 months or something, and I'll let you guys know if the rest of or at least the middle of 2018 has been as productive as the beginning and the end of 2017. So thanks for watching.